The day we got divorced, my ex-husband pressed a bank card into my hand. I was so angry I never used it. Then one day, I walked into a bank, checked the balance, and froze on the spot. The day Ethan Cole and I officially ended our marriage was on a gray, overcast morning in a small, sterile room at the Manhattan City Clerk's office. The white-painted walls were so bright they made my head feel empty the moment I stepped inside. The air was a mix of antiseptic alcohol and the faint, dusty smell of old paper, the familiar, cold, and impersonal scent of a place that processed human lives into paperwork. We sat side by side, a space the width of a single fist between us. That space had once been filled with the warmth of our breath, a shoulder to lean on, a familiar comfort. Now, it felt like an impassable canyon. I didn't look at him, and he didn't look at me. We sat with our backs straight, like two strangers who just happened to be next in the same line. The entire process was unbelievably fast. There were no arguments, no lingering regrets, not a single unnecessary word. We were like business partners whose contract had expired, here to sign the final termination documents. When the clerk slid 2 copies of the final divorce decree, stamped and signed, across the counter, my heart dropped. It was over. 7 years of my youth, a marriage I thought would last a lifetime, was now summarized on a single, thin sheet of paper. I reached out for my copy, my fingertips as cold as ice. Ethan picked up his. From beginning to end, he never once glanced my way. His profile was still as handsome as I remembered, but there was a dark shadow of stubble on his jaw, and the skin around his eyes was tight with exhaustion. I knew he was in the middle of a massive, multi-billion-dollar financial project. In the grand scheme of his packed schedule, divorcing me was probably just another task to be checked off. We walked out of the building, one slightly ahead of the other. The midday New York sun beat down on my skin, but it felt dry and harsh, offering no warmth. Just as I was about to turn toward the subway station, I heard his voice from behind me. "Chloe." I stopped, but didn't turn around. I was afraid that if I did, the fragile shell I'd painstakingly built around myself all morning would shatter. His footsteps grew closer, and then a hand appeared in front of me. On his palm rested a silver bank card. "What is this?" I finally turned, my gaze cold. "You've been through a lot," he said, his voice as calm and steady as if he were discussing the weather. "There's some money in here. A settlement, you could call it. The pin is your birthday. Take care of yourself." The word settlement felt like a rusted needle piercing the softest part of my heart. A settlement for what? For the nights I waited up for him in our small rented apartment in our early years? For the time I had a raging fever and had to take a cab to an urgent care clinic alone to get an IV drip? Or for the love that had eroded away under the weight of his endless work and client dinners? A wave of humiliation washed over me, my face burning. In that moment, I didn't feel like the woman who had shared his bed for 7 years. I felt like a woman being paid off to end a relationship. "I don't need it." The words escaped through my clenched teeth, my voice so cold it felt foreign even to me. "Take it," he insisted, pushing the card closer. "You'll need money to find a new place, to buy things. Don't be stubborn." His words might have sounded like concern, but to my ears, they dripped with pity. As if without him, I'd be destitute in this expensive city. I stared at him, then let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You think I can't survive in New York without you, Ethan? Don't worry. I won't starve to death, and even if I did, I wouldn't touch a single cent of your money." With that, I snatched the card from his hand. It was less like accepting it and more like ripping it away. Then I turned and walked away, almost running. I could feel his gaze on my back, but I never once looked back. The apartment I found was a small studio in Astoria, Queens. The smell of new paint and cheap, factory-made furniture still stung my nose. It was just one room with a tiny kitchenette alcove. Compared to our spacious, high-floor apartment in Manhattan, with its sweeping views of the East River, it was like night and day. I stood in the middle of the empty living space, clutching the bank card. Its sharp corners dug painfully into my palm. What is this? Severance pay? Is this cold piece of plastic all I get for 7 years of my life? The more I thought about it, the angrier and more miserable I became. I stormed into the bedroom area, yanked open the bottom drawer of the dresser, and threw the card into the dark recesses with all my might, as if I were discarding a piece of trash that disgusted me. I, Chloe Davis, swore to myself that I would never, ever touch the money on that card. "I'll show you," I vowed silently, slamming the drawer shut. I won't just survive without you. I will thrive. The card and my failed marriage were buried in darkness, left to be covered by the dust of time. I had no idea then that 2 years later, that same card would reconnect us in a way neither of us could have ever predicted. After the divorce, I began my life alone in New York in earnest. There was no one to nudge me to go to bed, no late-night dinner to prepare for a husband returning home, no familiar sound of a key in the lock in the dead of night. The first night in that small studio, I lay with my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distinct beat of my own heart. It wasn't loneliness from missing him, but from a profound emptiness, a void so vast I had no idea how to fill it. The next morning, I woke up early. I refused to let myself be weak. I had chosen to walk away with my head held high, and I wouldn't allow myself to drown in sorrow. I threw myself into my work like a wind-up machine. At the office, I processed paperwork for days on end, pushed projects forward, and attended back-to-back meetings. When I got home at night, I cleaned, did laundry, learned to cook simple meals, and opened my laptop for online courses to advance my professional skills. I didn't give myself a single minute to think about Ethan. In my most exhausting moments, the thought of the bank card, tucked away in the back of that drawer, would surface. Each time, I pushed myself harder. I had to be stronger. I refused to look back, and I wouldn't allow myself to. In that first month, I had to learn how to change a light bulb, unclog a drain, and haul a 40-pound case of bottled water up 3 flights of stairs. My shoulders and hands ached, but I didn't cry. I just laughed and told myself, "See? You can do it all without a man." On weekends, instead of holing up in my room whenever he used to be away on business, I signed up for a yoga class near my apartment. In the evenings, I'd ride my bike to Gantry Plaza State Park to breathe in the fresh air, watching people walk their dogs and couples laugh together. Sometimes, a pang of sadness would hit me, but I would quickly turn my head away. 1 month, 2 months, then half a year passed. The wound in my heart didn't disappear, but it slowly began to form a scar. I no longer flinched when someone called my name in a tone similar to his. I stopped subconsciously checking my phone at midnight. I was getting used to being alone. That first year was the hardest of my life. I lost a noticeable amount of weight, but my eyes grew brighter, more determined. I lived with extreme frugality, meticulously tracking every expense. It wasn't about the money itself, it was about building a sense of security. In a city like New York, being broke meant you didn't even have the right to be weak. My best friend, Mia, worried about me. "Chloe, don't push yourself so hard. Do you want me to set you up with someone?" I just smile and shake my head. "No thanks. I'm too busy making money right now. Men are just a distraction." Mia would sigh. "You've always been so stubborn." I knew she cared, but I didn't want anyone else in my life just then. I needed time to stand firmly on my own 2 feet without leaning on anyone. By the end of that year, I received an outstanding performance review at work. My direct supervisor called me into his office and promoted me to assistant project manager. My salary increased by nearly 50%. Holding that first new pay stub, for the first time, I felt truly proud of myself. It was an achievement I had earned through my own efforts, not by standing beside someone else. I used some of my savings to buy more furniture for my little studio, a gray sofa, a floor lamp that cast a warm yellow glow, and a few small potted plants. I even adopted a small cat I named Cloud. Every evening, coming home to find Cloud curled up on the sofa made the place feel a little warmer. My life was gradually getting back on track. It was calm, stable, and completely void of Ethan. I deliberately avoided any news of him. I never asked our mutual friends and never looked him up on social media. We were, I told myself, 2 parallel lines that had once crossed but were now destined to move apart forever. The bank card lay in the drawer, gathering dust. I had almost forgotten it existed. As I entered my 2nd year of independence, my career flourished. I was managing my own team. The pressure was immense, but so were the opportunities. I was so busy that most nights I'd come home and collapse into bed. On the rare quiet evening, I'd hold Cloud and watch an old movie, or pour myself a glass of cheap wine and savor the peace. I thought this was how my life would be from now on. I didn't need love, I just needed to be strong enough. Then, one rainy afternoon during a meeting, my phone started buzzing incessantly. It was my father. My heart sank. He almost never called me during work hours. "Hello? Dad?" "Chloe." On the other end, his voice was trembling. "It's your mother." She collapsed. "We're in the emergency room at Mount Sinai." A roar filled my ears. I couldn't hear anything he said after that. All I knew was that I shot up from my chair, excused myself, and ran out into the pouring rain. In that moment, I realized that no matter how strong I pretended to be, there were some things I could never handle alone. I burst out of the office building into the gray afternoon. It was the height of the summer rainy season in New York, and the sky had darkened in an instant, unleashing a downpour that seemed intent on swallowing everything. I stood on the curb, frantically trying to hail a cab. My blouse was soaked through, sticking to my skin, and my hair was a mess, but I didn't care how I looked. There was only one thought in my mind: get to the hospital. Now. Inside the taxi, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I called my dad back, my voice cracking. "Dad, how is she? What are the doctors saying?" "They're running tests now," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Just get here, honey. She's still unconscious." My chest felt like it was being squeezed by an iron fist. I stared out the window as familiar streets blurred past in the rain. This massive city had suddenly become a strange and terrifying place. I thought I was strong enough to handle anything, but I was learning that some fears render you completely powerless. Mount Sinai was chaotic. Patients and their families milled about, a confusing mixture of crying, hushed calls, and the frantic squeak of shoes on wet linoleum. I rushed down the hallway, my heart pounding. Then I saw him, my father, hunched over on a plastic chair outside the ER. "Dad!" I called out, my voice barely a whisper. He looked up. In just a few hours, it seemed like more gray had appeared in his hair. He stood and gripped my hand tightly. "You're here." She said her head hurt terribly, and then she fell. His voice broke. "The doctor thinks it might be a brain hemorrhage." The words hit me with physical force. I stumbled back, needing to brace myself against the wall to stay upright. "A brain hemorrhage?" My father, his eyes red, nodded. "They're doing a CT scan, but they said it doesn't look good." We waited, sitting on the cold chairs outside the emergency room doors. Every minute felt like an hour. I stared at the closed doors, my mind flooded with memories of my mother, a woman who had devoted her entire life to her family, always telling me not to worry about her, to just live well. And now, she was lying behind those doors, her life hanging in the balance. About 30 minutes later, a doctor emerged. His expression was grave, his voice firm. "Family of Sarah Davis?" My father and I shot to our feet. "That's us." The doctor glanced at a chart in his hand. "Your mother has suffered an extensive cerebral hemorrhage. Her condition is critical. We need to perform surgery as soon as possible to remove the hematoma. If we don't, it could be fatal." I felt the blood drain from my face. What are the chances of success, doctor?" "Around 70%. However, the cost will be significant. Including the surgery, ICU stay, and post-operative care, you'll need to be prepared for around $80,000. $80,000. The number struck me like a hammer. My legs felt weak. My father stammered, "Doctor, is there any way to reduce that?" The doctor shook his head. "That's a conservative estimate. We don't have much time, so you'll need to make a decision quickly." With that, he turned and left. I stood there, frozen. For a normal family like ours, $80,000 was a fortune. I quickly opened my banking app and checked my savings. After 2 years of working nonstop, I had managed to save about $25,000. I showed the phone to my dad. "This is all I have." He sighed, pulling a worn passbook from his pocket. "We have about $6,000 at home. We were saving it for a rainy day. I just never thought it would be this." Together, we had $31,000, less than half of what we needed. A suffocating tightness gripped my chest. Time was my mother's life, and we didn't have the money. Without another thought, I picked up my phone and started calling everyone I could think of. Friends, colleagues, distant relatives. "Hi, Mia. It's me. I'm in a terrible situation. I need to borrow some money. My mom needs emergency surgery. Anything you can spare would help." Mia was silent for a few seconds. "Oh, Chloe, I can put together 2,000. I'll wire it to you right now." My throat was tight. "Thank you. Thank you so much." I immediately dialed another friend. "Mark?" "Hi, it's Chloe. Something urgent has come up. I was wondering if I could borrow $1,000 for a little while. I can write up a formal IOU." He hesitated. "Chloe, I just bought a new car, so cash is tight. Could you get by with 500? "Yes. Of course. Thank you, Mark." Call after call, one humbling request after another. I had never felt so small. Some people helped, others apologized and declined. I didn't blame any of them. I knew money was never easy. After nearly 2 hours, I had managed to raise another $12,000. In total, we had about $43,000. We were still almost $40,000 short. A nurse came out again. "Have you made your decision? We need to move the patient to the OR." My father gripped my arm, his voice trembling. "Chloe, what if we just ask them to do the surgery first? Tell them we'll figure out the rest of the money later?" I looked at the ER doors, tears streaming down my face. I knew that's not how hospitals worked. Without the payment, they couldn't proceed. I stumbled back and sank into a chair, my mind a chaotic mess. I hated myself. Hated that I hadn't saved more, that I'd thought just getting by was enough. If anything happened to my mom, I would never forgive myself. In that moment of absolute despair, an image flashed through my mind. The dark drawer in my small apartment, the silver bank card. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering. I immediately shook my head. No. No way. I made a vow. That's Ethan's money. Using it would be admitting I was wrong, that I needed him. My pride, everything I had built myself up on for the past 2 years, would crumble. But then I looked at my father. He sat with his back hunched, his hands clasped together, staring desperately at the operating room doors. And beyond those doors was my mother, fighting for her life with every passing second. Pride, dignity, self-respect. What did any of that matter right now? I closed my eyes, tears falling onto the back of my hand. "Chloe, you can endure any pain, but you don't have the right to gamble with your mother's life." I shot to my feet, my voice hoarse. "Dad, I'm going home for a bit. I think I have a way. You stay here with Mom. Call me if anything changes." My father grabbed my hand. "Be careful." I turned and walked quickly away from the hospital, a storm raging inside me. I knew that by taking this step, nothing would ever be the same. But if I didn't, I would live with regret for the rest of my life. I left the hospital in a daze. The rain had stopped, leaving behind puddles that reflected the yellow glow of the streetlights. The city was still bustling, cars rushing past endlessly, but in my eyes everything was blurry, like a scratched film. Sitting in the back of the taxi, I clenched my fists, trying not to sob out loud. I thought I was so strong. For 2 years, I had been independent, self-reliant, never asking for anything, never looking back. I was proud of that. But in the space of a single afternoon, all that pride had been pushed to the edge of a cliff. In the face of my mother's life, I had no other choice. The taxi stopped in front of the old apartment building where I lived. I paid the driver and rushed up the stairs. Each step felt twice as heavy as usual. My heart was pounding violently. I couldn't tell if it was from exhaustion or fear. I opened the door to my apartment. The familiar scent of my small life washed over me, but it no longer felt like a safe haven. The room was quiet. Cloud, who had been curled up on the sofa, lifted her head and let out a small meow. I didn't stop to pet her like I usually did. I walked straight to the bedroom area and stood before the dresser. The bottom drawer, the one I hadn't opened in 2 years. I bent down and placed my hand on the handle. With one pull, everything would change. I stood there for a long time, so long that my hand began to tremble. In my mind, my own voice from that day echoed with cruel clarity. I, Chloe Davis, will never, ever touch the money on that card. The vow came back to slap me in the face. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. It seems no matter how strong a person is, you can't be stronger than fate. I yanked the drawer open. The bank card was lying there quietly in a dark corner, covered in a thin layer of dust. For 2 years it had sat there, unmoving, as if waiting for this very moment. I picked it up. A cold sensation spread from my fingertips to my heart. It was no longer a symbol of humiliation. Right now, it was a lifeline. I sank onto the bed and covered my face with my hands. Tears streamed through my fingers, soaking my palms. I didn't know if I was crying for my mom, for myself, or for Ethan. Maybe it was for all of it. "You're not losing, Chloe," I told myself, each word a nail hammered into my resolve. "You're not admitting defeat. You're borrowing, and you will pay it back, double, triple, whatever it takes. As long as Mom is alive." I stood up, quickly changed my clothes, and put the card in my wallet. Before leaving, I took one last look around the room. This little apartment had watched a defeated woman slowly get back on her feet, and now it was watching her bow her head for the first time in 2 years. The bank's ATM was right on the corner. It was late now, and the vestibule was brightly lit. I stood in line, my heart burning with impatience. The woman in front of me was making a withdrawal, her movement slow. I suppressed the urge to tell her to hurry. When it was my turn, I stepped forward. My hand holding the card was shaking so much I almost dropped it. I took a deep breath and inserted it into the slot. The screen lit up, prompting me for a PIN. My birthday. A date he once remembered so well, the day he would send a gift no matter how busy he was. When we were in love, I took it for granted. After the divorce, the memory was just bitter. I raised my hand, hesitated for a second, then keyed in the numbers. Each beep felt like a drumbeat against my heart. PIN accepted. I swallowed hard. Several options appeared on the screen: cash withdrawal, transfer, balance inquiry. I had to know. I had to see how much was in there. I couldn't just blindly take money like a thief. With a trembling finger, I pressed balance inquiry. The screen loaded for a few seconds. That short wait felt like an eternity. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure the person behind me could hear it. And then, the numbers appeared. I froze on the spot. I blinked, then blinked again. I leaned closer to the screen, reading the digits one by one, from left to right. It wasn't tens of thousands of dollars. It was hundreds of thousands. The account balance was beyond anything I could have imagined. This is impossible. I stumbled back a step, my heart racing wildly. I thought I must be seeing things. 2 years ago, he said it was a settlement. I had assumed it would be a few tens of thousands at most. But this amount, it made no sense. No matter how successful Ethan was, there was no reason for him to give me this much money in a divorce. Was it a bank error? Was I using the wrong card? I quickly ejected the card and checked the bank name and the numbers again. It was the right one. The one he had given me on the day of our divorce. I didn't dare withdraw any money. A profound sense of unease washed over me. I had to get clarity. I turned and walked straight into the bank's main lobby. It was almost closing time, but I pulled a number and sat down to wait, clutching my purse. The number from the ATM screen kept replaying in my mind, each time making my chest tighten. When my number was called, I went to the teller's window and handed her the card and my ID. "I'd like to confirm the balance on this card, and I need a printout of the full transaction history for the past 2 years. The young woman looked at me, a little surprised. 2 years? That's a long time. Are you sure?" "Yes, I'm sure." She nodded and started typing on her computer. The rhythmic clatter of the keyboard only made me more nervous. The printer in the back whirred to life, spitting out white sheets of paper, one after another. 1 page, then 2, then 3. As the stack of paper grew thicker, my heart began to pound. I had a feeling something was waiting for me in those pages, a truth I had never considered, a truth that was about to change everything. The teller organized the papers and passed them to me through the slot. "Here you go, ma'am. The current balance is..." She read out the exact same number I had seen on the ATM. I barely heard the rest. My ears were ringing. I took the stack of statements, my hands trembling so much the papers rustled. I moved to the side and sat down in a waiting chair, taking a few deep breaths to steady myself. Then I opened the first page, the first transaction. The date was 2 days after our divorce. Deposit, $200,000. The memo line was blank. I let out a small sigh of relief. At least this part made sense. This must have been the settlement he mentioned. But it was the very next line that made me stop. The 15th of the following month. Deposit, $3,000. Memo, living expenses. My heart dropped. I flipped to the next page. And the next. Every single month, on the 15th, like clockwork, $3,000, living expenses, for 2 years, without missing a single month. I felt my body go rigid. I couldn't believe my eyes. A lump formed in my throat. I kept turning the pages, my hands shaking more violently now. Besides the regular deposits, there were others. December of last year. Memo. For a warmer coat. It's getting cold. My birthday. Memo. Happy birthday. Christmas. Memo. Christmas money. Each short phrase felt like a blade, both painful and warm. I felt like I couldn't breathe. For 2 years, while I had been so proud of surviving without him, he had been on the other side of the city, steadily sending me money, silently, quietly. Sitting in the busy bank lobby, I let my tears fall onto the transaction history. I had misunderstood him. For 2 whole years, I had completely and utterly misunderstood him. I sat motionless in that bank chair for a long time, oblivious to the people coming and going, to the automated voice calling out numbers. In my hands, I held the stack of papers, the ink still fresh. They were thin, but they felt as heavy as stone. Each short memo, each neat number, it wasn't just money. It was time. It was persistence. It was an emotion that had been carefully wrapped and preserved for 2 years. For 2 years, I had lived on pride. For 2 years, he had lived in silence. I thought that bank card was a humiliation, but it was the only way he knew how to stay by my side after I had turned my back and walked away. No calls, no texts, no interruptions, just sending money, as regularly as breathing, as if doing so would give me a safety net, even if I never knew it was there. My throat ached. I felt so foolish, so pathetically naive. I had created a narrative of him in my head and had believed it for 2 years. The truth, meanwhile, was held quietly and tenaciously within these transaction statements. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and put the statements in my bag. This was not the time for self-recrimination. My mother was waiting. I needed money, and I needed it now. I went back to the teller. I need to withdraw $50,000 in cash, and please wire the rest of the balance to this account at Mount Sinai Hospital. The teller was a bit taken aback by the large amount but nodded and began the process. I signed the forms with a trembling hand, my mind a blank slate. When the stacks of cash were placed in front of me, they felt impossibly heavy. Every bill was an apology I hadn't made, a 2-year-long misunderstanding. I left the bank, clutching the money bag. It was completely dark now, the streetlights glowing. The city was as bright as ever, but a storm was raging in my heart. I hailed a cab, gave the hospital address, and slumped into the seat. Covering my face with my hands, I let the tears come again, this time uncontrollably. For my mother, for him, and for myself. My phone rang in my hand. It was my father. "Chloe, the doctors are getting antsy. Are you on your way back?" "I'm coming right now, Dad. Don't worry." After hanging up, I stared at my phone screen. My finger hovered over my contact list. His name, Ethan Cole, was still there. A name I had deleted and resaved and deleted countless times. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. I had no idea how to even begin. But I knew if I didn't call him now, I would regret it. I pressed the call button. Each ringtone stretched on for an eternity. My heart was beating so hard it hurt. I was terrified he wouldn't answer, that he'd changed his number, that he no longer wanted to hear my voice. On the 4th ring, the call connected. "Hello," his voice. Low and a little raspy, tinged with a familiar weariness. With that single word, my defenses crumbled. Everything I had suppressed for 2 years came rushing out. It's me." There was a silence on the other end for a few seconds. "Chloe?" He said my name softly, as if he couldn't believe it was me. Tears streamed down my face. "I just went to the bank," I managed to say. I saw the transaction history. The air on the other end grew heavy. I could hear him take a deep, slow breath. "So you know. Why didn't you tell me?" My voice was broken, no longer an accusation, just pain. "Why would you do that? Do you have any idea what I thought for 2 years?" He was silent for a long time, so long I could hear the frantic drumming of my own heart in my ears. "I'm sorry," he finally said, 3 simple words, hoarse but heavy. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid you'd refuse. I was afraid you'd get hurt. I just thought, if I sent the money every month, you'd have something to fall back on if you ever needed it. I never imagined it would be like this. I broke down, sobbing. I misunderstood you for 2 years. I thought it was an insult. I'm such an idiot. It's not your fault. His voice dropped lower. It's mine. I was always used to solving everything with money. It wasn't until I lost you that I realized some things can't be bought. I clutched the phone, breathing hard. My mom, she has a brain hemorrhage. She's waiting for surgery. I used the money from the card. On the other end, he didn't hesitate for a second. Where are you? On my way to the hospital. Send me your location. I'll be right there. You don't have to. Chloe, he cut me off, his voice firm. Don't shut me out. Not now. I just want to help. I bit my lip. Finally, I nodded. Even though he couldn't see me, I sent it. The call ended. I leaned my head against the car window, watching the streetlights streak by. My mind was a mess. I was scared, hopeful, and guilty all at once. I had no idea what would happen after tonight, but I knew that, at least for this moment, I was no longer alone. When I got to the hospital, I practically ran to the billing office and paid. The clerk confirmed the payment and nodded. All set. We'll move the patient to the OR immediately. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, my legs nearly giving out. My father looked at me, his eyes red. You got the money? Yes. Mom can have the surgery. He didn't ask any more questions. Some things didn't need explaining right now. My mother was wheeled into surgery. As the doors swung shut, they separated us from the world of life and death. I sank into a chair, clasped my hands, and prayed. It had been a long time since I'd felt so small. About 30 minutes later, Ethan appeared at the end of the hall. He was wearing a white dress shirt with his tie loosened, as if he'd just rushed out of a meeting. His eyes scanned the hallway and locked onto me. He walked over, his steps quick. How is she? He asked quietly. She's in surgery. He nodded, said nothing more, and sat down beside me. The distance between us was close enough now that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. No one spoke, but this silence wasn't cold like the one on the day of our divorce. I stared at the operating room doors, tears silently rolling down my cheeks. In this moment of life and death, I understood. Some people, even after they leave, never truly disappear from your life. The hallway outside the operating room was stark white, the fluorescent lights reflecting off the cold tile floor. The smell of disinfectant was sharp, making my throat dry. I sat with my back ramrod straight, my hands clasped together so tightly they were numb. My eyes were fixed on the OR doors, as if staring long enough would make them open sooner. Ethan sat beside me. His shoulder brushed lightly against mine, and I could feel the steady, slightly heavy rhythm of his breathing. My father paced the hallway a few times before stopping at the window at the far end, looking out at the drizzling New York night. He didn't say a word, but I saw his shoulders tremble slightly. I wanted to get up and hug him, but my legs felt glued to the chair. Time crawled by at an agonizing pace. Each second was long and heavy, like a stone being placed on my chest. I tried to take deep breaths, but my mind kept drifting to old memories, to all the things he and I had missed during our 7 years of marriage. Ethan was the first to speak, his voice low, as if afraid to break the fragile silence. Chloe, have you eaten anything? I shook my head. No, I can't. He nodded and didn't press. A little while later, he got up and walked away. I thought he was going to make a phone call, but he returned about 10 minutes later with 2 cups of warm coffee from a vending machine. Drink some of this, he said, placing one in front of me. It's going to be a long night. I looked at the thin layer of foam on the surface of the coffee, then looked up at him. Thank you. The 2 words were simple, but they felt incredibly heavy coming out of my mouth. It was the first time I had thanked him in 2 years. He paused for a moment, then gave a very faint smile. It's nothing. We fell into silence again. But this time, it wasn't awkward. It was a quiet space, one where we both needed to confront our own thoughts. How have you been? I asked suddenly, my voice hoarse. For the past 2 years. He stared straight ahead, his gaze distant. The same as always. Work, meetings, late nights. The only difference was that the apartment was emptier. I clutched my coffee cup. Did you ever regret it? Regret what? Divorcing me. He turned to look at me. The look in his eyes made my chest ache. There was no blame in them, only weariness and sincerity. I regret that I didn't know how to hold on to you. Not because of the divorce, but because of everything I did wrong before it. I lowered my head. His words felt like they were touching an old wound. It didn't tear it open, but it throbbed with a dull ache. I was wrong, too. I never told you what I needed. I just expected you to know. He sighed. I was always slow to understand. I only figured it out after I lost you, and by then, it was too late. I had nothing more to say. There were too many unspoken things between us, too many misunderstandings piled up over the years. But tonight, in front of this operating room door, all of it felt trivial. My father came back and sat in the chair across from us. He looked at Ethan for a moment, then spoke. "Thank you, son. If it wasn't for you." He trailed off, his voice thick with emotion. Ethan stood up and bowed his head respectfully. "Don't mention it, sir. It's what I should do." Watching them, my heart settled a little. In the past, he was always so busy, rarely attending family gatherings. I used to resent him for being so detached. But now, here he was, not making a scene, not being dramatic, just quietly holding his ground. Around 3 a.m., the OR doors were still shut. I was so tired my head was spinning, but I didn't dare fall asleep. Every time my eyelids started to droop, I'd jerk awake, terrified I'd miss something important. Ethan placed a hand on my shoulder. "Lean on me for a bit." I hesitated for a few seconds, then nodded. I shifted and rested my head lightly on his shoulder. It was as firm as I remembered, and the familiar scent of his cologne made my heart skip a beat. I didn't cry. I just closed my eyes, allowing myself a moment of weakness. I don't know how much time passed. Suddenly, I heard urgent footsteps. I shot up. The surgeon came out of the OR, pulling off his mask. We all stood up immediately. "The surgery was a success, for now," he said. "She's pulled through the worst of it, but she'll need to be under close observation for the next 48 hours. A massive weight lifted from my chest. My legs gave out, and I nearly collapsed. Ethan quickly steadied me. I gripped his arm, tears of relief pouring down my face. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much." My father clasped his hands together, his voice shaking. "Thank you, doctor. It's a miracle." My mother was moved to the recovery room. I saw her through the glass window. Her face was pale, but her chest was rising and falling in a steady rhythm. I brought a hand to my mouth and sobbed. Ethan stood behind me, his hand resting silently on my shoulder. As dawn approached, the rain stopped. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the hallway window, weak but strangely warm. I sat in the chair, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. Now that the immediate crisis was over, all the suppressed emotions began to surface. Ethan sat down beside me. "Go home and get some rest. Your dad and I will stay here." I shook my head. "I want to stay." He didn't insist, just nodded. We sat in silence again, but this time, my heart was less tense. It felt as though, during this long night, we had crossed some invisible line together. "If I hadn't called you that day," I asked very quietly, "would you have ever known?" He looked at me, his gaze deep. "I wouldn't have known, but I would have kept sending the money, until the day you used it, or until the day I was no longer around to send it." His words made my heart ache. I looked back at him. I had so much I wanted to say, but in the end, only one thing came out. "You're such an idiot." He smiled. A tired but relieved smile. "Yeah, I am." We looked at each other, saying nothing more. After hearing the doctor say my mother was stable, it felt like all the strength had drained from my body. I sat slumped against the plastic chair in the hallway, my mind blank. Ethan handled the paperwork, signed consent forms, and discussed the future treatment plan with the doctor. He managed everything with a quiet, calm efficiency, without needing help from anyone. Watching his back as he moved through the hospital, a strange sense of familiarity washed over me. It was like years ago, when he was my only anchor in this vast city. My father went to buy some congee for my mother, following the nurse's instructions. That left just Ethan and me outside the recovery room. The glass door remained shut, separating us, but just seeing my mother's steady breathing was enough to calm my heart. "Drink some water." Ethan handed me a bottle. I took it and drank a few sips. My throat was parched, and the cold water helped clear my head. "Thank you for everything," I said, my voice very soft but this time without hesitation. He looked at me. His eyes held a flicker of surprise before he slowly shook his head. "Don't thank me. I didn't do it to be thanked." I bit my lip, but I don't know what I would have done without you. He didn't answer right away. After a moment, he said, "If I hadn't called, I wouldn't have known about your mother either. But if I had been given the chance, I would have done the exact same thing." I turned my head away, my eyes stinging. His words were calm, but they hurt my heart more than any accusation could have. As the morning wore on, the hospital grew busier. My mother was still in the recovery unit, and visitors weren't allowed. I went out for a bit to buy some personal necessities. When I returned, Ethan was still there, right where I had left him. "Aren't you going to work?" I asked. I took time off. I was surprised. "This is more important than my project," he said simply, without a trace of hesitation. A small tremor went through my heart. I had once resented him for always putting work first. But now, hearing him say this, I didn't know whether to feel happy or sad. In the afternoon, the doctor allowed us to visit my mother for a short time. My father and I put on gowns and entered the room. My mother lay on the bed, looking noticeably thinner, a white bandage wrapped around her head. I took her hand. It was frail, but still warm. "Mom, it's me," I whispered. She didn't respond, but her eyelashes fluttered. I was so overjoyed my throat tightened. My father stood beside her, tears rolling down his cheeks. I glanced back. Ethan was standing outside the glass door. His gaze followed me, quiet but full of concern. After leaving the room, I leaned against the wall and let out a long sigh of relief. Ethan walked over. "She's okay." I nodded. "Yes, thanks to you." This time, he didn't argue. He just looked at me, his eyes softening. We sat down and talked about practical things, hospital bills, care schedules, long-term treatment plans. When Ethan said he would cover any shortfall, I immediately objected. "No, I'll pay you back. All of it." He looked at me, neither angry nor amused. "Chloe, this isn't the time to argue about that, but I don't want to be indebted to you forever." He was silent for a few seconds. "Then let's call it a loan. You can pay me back when you're ready. I won't rush you." I looked at him, and finally, I nodded. It was probably the only compromise I could accept. That afternoon, my father went home to rest for a while. I stayed at the hospital, and Ethan brought me a container of food. I ate a few bites and put it down. I was exhausted, but I didn't want to leave. "Get some sleep," he said. "I'm scared something will happen." "I'm here." I looked at him for a long moment before finally closing my eyes. I don't know how long I slept, but when I woke up, it was already night. A jacket was draped over me. Ethan was sitting beside me, looking at his phone. "You're awake," he said. "Yeah." I pulled the jacket closer, feeling a familiar warmth. It had been so long. "Chloe," he said my name, his voice serious. "I know this might not be the right time to talk about this, but I don't want to be silent anymore." I looked at him, my heart beating faster. I've done a lot of thinking over the past 2 years, about my mistakes. If I could do it all over again, I wouldn't have chosen silence. I wouldn't have used money as a substitute for care. He paused, just letting me listen. "I can't say if I deserve another chance, but I want to make one thing clear. I never saw you as a burden or someone who needed compensation. I just didn't know how to love you properly." A lump formed in my throat. I was wrong too. I never gave you a chance to explain. I chose to leave and handle everything myself. We looked at each other. There was no more blame, no more pride, just two people who had been through pain, trying to mend old cracks. The nurse's voice came over the intercom, announcing the end of visiting hours. We stood up. Ethan looked at me. "Go home and rest. You have work tomorrow." I took a few days off. He nodded. "Then let me take you home." I hesitated, then nodded. On the way to the parking garage, we walked side by side. We didn't hold hands, but the distance between us felt much smaller. In the car, I looked out the window. The city at night was still loud, the lights brilliant. I suddenly realized that some relationships I thought were over were really just on pause. And some people I thought had walked far away were actually standing quietly in place, waiting for me to look back. When the car stopped in front of my building, I turned to him. "Ethan?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for not leaving." He gave a very faint smile. "I never went anywhere." Those words made my heart tremble. I opened the car door and got out, but my heart no longer felt as heavy as before. I knew the road ahead would be long and not necessarily easy, but at least I no longer had to walk it alone in the dark. The following days unfolded in a slow but tense rhythm. My mother was still in the ICU, with only a few minutes of visiting time allowed each day. My father and I took turns staying at the hospital. Ethan showed up almost every day. Sometimes he would arrive before me. Other times he would stay late into the night. He wasn't talkative or overly expressive. He just quietly did what needed to be done, as if it were his natural responsibility. In the mornings, he would bring my father breakfast and check on the hospital bills. At lunch, he would bring me food, even though I always said I wasn't hungry. In the evenings, when I was at my most exhausted, he would sit beside me, offering a silent shoulder for me to lean on. No questions, no verbal comfort. It was that perfectly timed silence that put me at ease. One afternoon, when my mother was a bit more lucid, the doctor allowed us to visit for longer. I held her hand and told her little stories about my cat, about how my job was going well. She looked at me, her eyes still tired, but a faint smile touched her lips. Ethan stood quietly in the background. When I glanced over and our eyes met, he quickly looked away, as if afraid I'd see something too clearly. After leaving the room, I asked him, "What were you doing? Just standing there?" He answered with startling honesty, "I wanted to see if you were okay." That simple answer left me speechless. I realized he had always put me first, in his own way. It was just that before, I had never seen it. One evening, my father went home to rest, leaving me alone in the hallway. I sat watching people come and go. Ethan sat down beside me and handed me a paper bag. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside were a pair of soft slippers and a thin shawl. "I figured your feet must hurt from standing in those shoes all day," he said, "and it gets cold in the hospital at night." I was stunned. The old Ethan would never have noticed such small details. I looked up at him. "You've changed." He gave a slightly self-deprecating smile. "I'm learning." "Learning what?" "How to show I care in a way that doesn't make you uncomfortable." I laughed. It was the first genuine, relaxed laugh I'd had in days. The sound echoed in the empty hallway, small but enough to chip away at some of the darkness in my heart. On the rare occasions we had some downtime, we talked more. Not the tense conversations of the past, but about everyday things. He talked about work, about the pressure of managing a huge project. I talked about my early days of living alone, about learning to fix things, about my cat, Cloud. "You're stronger than I ever thought," he said in a low voice. "It's not that I'm strong. I just didn't have another choice." He nodded. "I know, but I wish I had been there with you then, instead of leaving you to face it alone." I no longer blamed him. Whatever resentment I had held had been worn away by time and circumstance. All that was left was a sense of regret and a tiny hope that things could be different from now on. A week later, my mother was moved to a regular ward. Her condition gradually stabilized. The doctor said she would need a long recovery period, but she was out of danger. I let out a huge sigh of relief. It felt like waking up from a long nightmare. That afternoon, Ethan took my father home. It was just the two of us at the hospital. I stood on a small balcony, taking in the air. The city lights were beginning to flicker on, reflecting off the dim night sky. He came to stand beside me. "Everything's going to be okay." "Yeah," I replied, my voice much lighter than before. "Chloe," he said my name slowly. "I can't make any grand promises. I just want to ask one thing." I turned to look at him. "When all of this settles down, could you give me a chance to be by your side? Not as your ex-husband, but as someone who wants to get to know you all over again, from the beginning." My heart began to pound. I had wondered if this moment would come, but now that it was here, I was flustered. I didn't answer right away. I needed to be honest with myself. "I don't know if I'm ready to start over." He nodded, without a hint of disappointment. "I understand. I won't rush you. I just needed to know I wasn't being rejected from the start." I looked at him for a long time. In his eyes, there was no longer the confident arrogance of a successful man, but a rare patience and sincerity. I suddenly realized that the man standing in front of me was very different from the man he was 2 years ago. "I need time," I said. He smiled. "I have time." We stood side by side in silence. A gentle breeze blew past, carrying the familiar scent of antiseptic. Strangely, I felt a sense of peace. No more fear, No more tension. Just a faint warmth that made me no longer want to push him away. That night, when I got home and opened the door, Cloud ran up to me, meowing insistently. I bent down and picked her up, stroking her soft fur. The little apartment was the same, but the feeling of loneliness was no longer as heavy. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. 2 years ago, I believed that being strong meant not needing anyone. Now, I understood something different. Being strong doesn't mean rejecting all care. Sometimes, it takes just as much courage to let someone in. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. Home yet? Yes. You should get some sleep. I'll be at the hospital in the morning. I stared at his message, then typed a reply. Okay. You get some rest too. I put the phone down, a faint smile on my lips. I didn't know what the future held or if we could ever truly be together again. But at least for now, when I thought of the word us, I was no longer afraid. In the days that followed, my life slowly settled into a new rhythm. My mother was moved to a regular ward. Though still weak, she was more alert, able to hold conversations and eat thin porridge. My father stayed with her at night, and I would take over during the day. Ethan usually stopped by in the evenings after work. He never overstayed his welcome or intruded, simply asking how things were before quietly leaving. It was as if he was afraid of getting too close and making me uncomfortable. I realized he was being incredibly careful. The old, assertive Ethan who would do things without asking because he thought he knew what was best for me was gone. Now, every small action left plenty of room for me to choose. One afternoon, while I was peeling an apple for my mother, he came in. He put a fruit basket on the table, nodded to my father, and then turned to me. How's your mom today? I nodded. The doctor said if she keeps improving, she can start physical therapy in a few days. That's great news. He smiled in relief. My mother looked at him, her eyes gentle. You must be Ethan. Yes, ma'am. Hello. He bowed slightly, respectfully. It's been a while. Thank you for helping our family through this difficult time. Ethan shook his head. It's what I should do. Watching the scene, my heart softened. Some things I thought belonged to the past could still stir emotions when they reappeared. Later that afternoon, my father went out to run some errands, leaving just Ethan and me in the room. The air was quiet, punctuated only by the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. Ethan stood by the window, looking out. Chloe, can we talk for a minute? I put down the paring knife and nodded. He turned and stood in front of me, his expression serious. I told you I wouldn't rush you, he began, but I don't want to be silent anymore. I'm afraid if I keep waiting, I'll lose you all over again. I looked at him, my heart beating slowly but very clearly. I can't promise I'll be a perfect man, but I can promise that from now on, I will talk to you about anything that concerns us. I'll be clear. I won't assume, I won't force, and I won't use work or money as a substitute for care. He paused, taking a deep breath. I want a chance to get to know you again, properly. If you say no, that's okay. I'll accept it, but I don't want to regret not saying this later. The hospital room was quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat. For the past 2 years, I had gotten used to standing on my own, protecting myself, walling myself off. Now, in the face of his candor, those walls were shaking. I can't promise you anything, I said slowly. I need time. I don't want to go back to you out of emotion or because of what happened. I need to be sure we won't repeat the same mistakes. He nodded. I understand. I don't need a promise. Just a chance to get a little closer. I didn't answer right away, but I didn't refuse either. And for Ethan, that was enough. That evening, he drove me home. On the way, we talked about small things, how my mother's physical therapy should be handled, how I needed to sort things out at work, about my cat, Cloud. When did you get a cat? Right after I started living alone. It helped with the loneliness. He nodded. Can I come see her sometime? I laughed. She's pretty picky. Doesn't like just anyone. He laughed with me. Then I'll have to work for it. Those simple conversations made my heart feel lighter. There were no more grand pronouncements or distant promises, just ordinary, small plans. A few days later, my mother was transferred to a rehabilitation center. I took another week off work to help her settle in. Ethan still visited regularly, but he always asked first, "Is it a good time for me to come by?" If I said I was tired, he would just say, "Okay, get some rest," and wouldn't show up. It was a level of respect he had never shown before. One evening, I got a text from him. "If you have time this weekend, I'd like to take you out for a meal. Not a date, just dinner." I stared at the screen for a long time. The words "just dinner" were so simple that I smiled. "I'll see," he replied instantly. "Okay, let me know when you're ready." I put my phone down and leaned back in my chair. I realized he was doing one thing right that he had never done before. He was giving me a choice. Not forcing me, not waiting in silence, just standing there, clear and patient. His presence was becoming a part of my life again, but it wasn't invasive. I still worked, took care of my mother, and had my time with Cloud in my little apartment. All that was added was an occasional text, a short phone call, and a presence that was just right. That night, I sat by my mother's bed, listening to her tell old stories. She took my hand, her voice weak but warm. "Chloe, don't be afraid to lean on others. Having someone willing to stand by you doesn't mean you're weak." I looked at my mom, my eyes welling up. "I know, Mom." Leaving her room, I stood in the hallway and looked at the night sky. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that, at least for now, I wasn't running away anymore. I was standing still, facing my feelings, and giving myself a chance. That weekend, I accepted his offer. It wasn't because of some grand decision, nor was it out of pity or a fleeting emotion. I just wanted to see what it would feel like to let my guard down after 2 years. I sent Ethan a short text. "Tonight is good." He replied almost immediately. "I'll pick you up at 6. Inside my apartment, everything was the same, but my mood was different. I chose a simple dress, nothing too fancy. I didn't want to make this dinner a date, nor did I want it to feel like we were going back in time. I just wanted to be myself, in the present. Ethan arrived on time. He was waiting downstairs, wearing a light blue shirt and holding a small bouquet of flowers. When he saw me, he paused for a moment, then handed them to me. "I didn't know what you liked, so I picked the simplest ones." I looked at the bouquet of white daisies and smiled. "Thank you." We got in the car. He asked me what I wanted to eat. I thought for a moment, something like a home-cooked meal. He glanced at me, a little surprised. "Who's home?" "There's a small, family-run Italian place near here. I don't want to go anywhere fancy." He nodded immediately. "Okay, whatever you want." The little restaurant was tucked away on a quiet side street. The smell of garlic bread and marinara sauce filled the air. We sat in a corner booth. No one brought up the past, not the divorce, not the money. We talked about the food, the weather, about completely ordinary things. "You're eating more than you used to," he said, his voice gentle. "Yeah. There's no one nagging me about my figure anymore," I said, half joking, half serious. He laughed. "I really was clueless back then, wasn't I?" I didn't answer, just picked up another piece of bread. That admission, with no excuses or justifications, made me feel more at ease than any long apology could have. Halfway through the meal, he put down his fork and looked at me. "Chloe, there's something I want to say. I'm not trying to convince you or ask for forgiveness." I looked up. "Go on." He took a deep breath. "If we do move forward from here, I want to set some ground rules. For us." I was a little surprised, but I nodded. "First, no more silence. We talk about things, even if they're hard to hear. Second, we're clear about money. I don't want to repeat the mistake of using it as a substitute for care. If I'm helping, I'll say I'm helping. Whether it's a loan or a gift, you'll have the right to choose. Third, we respect each other's space. I won't push you if you don't want something." He paused, looking at me very seriously. "And finally, if you ever feel this isn't right, you have the right to stop, anytime. I won't hold you back out of obligation or because of the past." I was quiet for a moment. The rules sounded simple, but they were the very things we had missed in our marriage. "What about you?" he asked. "I have a rule too," I said. He looked at me. "I won't sacrifice myself to save a relationship. If I ever feel like I'm just enduring, I will say so. And if things can't change, I will leave." He nodded without a hint of hesitation. "I accept that." Dinner ended on a comfortable note. After leaving the restaurant, we walked for a bit. The streetlights cast a yellow glow on the damp pavement, and a cool breeze blew. Ethan stopped. "Chloe, I know I have no right to ask for more, but I still want to ask, are you comfortable being here with me now?" I thought about it with complete honesty. "Yes, but I'm still scared." Scared of what? Of getting my hopes up again, only to be disappointed. He nodded. Then let's go slow. With no great expectations. Looking at him, I suddenly felt a sense of relief. Maybe this was the right way to begin. In the weeks that followed, we saw each other more often, but always kept a comfortable pace. Sometimes it was a quick coffee after work. Other times we'd visit my mother at the hospital together and then go our separate ways. There were no more floods of texts, no feeling of being controlled. My mother quickly noticed the change. "You two are making progress," she said, her voice playful. "I don't know, Mom. We're just trying." My mother smiled. "Trying is good. It means you feel at peace." Her words echoed in my mind all day. Peace. 2 years ago, I thought peace meant not needing anyone. Now, I understood that peace was having someone by your side who didn't make you lose yourself. One evening, Ethan came to my apartment for the first time since the divorce. I was a little nervous. Cloud stood on the sofa, watching him with wary eyes. "She doesn't like strangers," I warned him. He bent down and slowly extended his hand. "Hi there." Cloud didn't come closer, but she didn't run away either. I laughed. "That's progress." He didn't stay long. Before he left, he stood at the door. "Thank you for letting me in." "Thank you for respecting my space," I replied. We looked at each other. There was no hug, no hand-holding, but I knew something was being carefully rebuilt between us. That night, lying in bed, I thought about our dinner, about the rules, about the comfort of not having to try so hard. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I was sure of one thing. If we started again, it would begin not with sacrifice, but with conversation. After that first dinner, Ethan and I entered a strange new phase. We were no longer husband and wife, but we weren't exactly lovers either. We were like old friends learning how to meet again, slowly and carefully. I still went to work every day, took care of my mother in the evenings, and occasionally met him for a simple coffee or meal. Everything seemed peaceful, but there was always a taut string in my heart, one that felt like it could snap at the slightest pull. I knew my fear had never really disappeared. It had just subsided. One Monday morning, as I was walking into a meeting at work, the front desk called me. "Miss Davis, you have a visitor." I looked up and saw a woman standing by the reception desk. My heart stopped. It was Jessica, Ethan's former assistant, the same woman I had suspected, been jealous of, and fought with him about until we were both exhausted. "Chloe, it's been a while," she said with a smile. It was a familiar smile, but now it sent a chill down my spine. "Hello. What can I do for you?" I tried to remain composed, but my hands had clenched into fists. "Do you have a minute?" We went to the cafe across the street. Jessica ordered an iced tea. I just got water. I wasn't in the mood for anything else. "I hear you and Ethan are seeing each other again," she said, getting straight to the point. I looked at her. "Who told you that?" "Ethan did." I frowned slightly. Ethan had never told me he'd discussed us with anyone else. A familiar, uncomfortable feeling began to rise. "I don't mean any harm," she said. "I just think there's something you should know." I waited silently for her to continue. "Back when you two were married, there was nothing more than a professional relationship between us, but I know that closeness hurt you." I gave a faint smile. "Are you here to apologize?" Jessica shook her head. "Not exactly. I'm here to tell you that Ethan isn't a man who changes easily. He can make a lot of promises, but when work calls, he will always put it first." I looked her straight in the eye. "So what do you want me to do?" "I just don't want you to make the same mistake twice. You were hurt so badly 2 years ago. I'm sure you haven't forgotten." Her words hit my deepest fear right on the head. I remembered the nights I had waited alone, his texts saying he was busy, the endless arguments. I took a deep breath to keep my voice from trembling. "Thank you for the reminder, but what happens between Ethan and me is for me to decide." Jessica looked at me, her expression unreadable. "I just hope you don't get your hopes up too high." With that, she stood up and left. I remained in my seat. The faint peace I had felt over the past few days had been shattered. I didn't want to admit it, but her words had planted a seed of doubt in my mind. That afternoon, Ethan came to pick me up to visit my mother. I looked at him, Jessica's voice echoing in my head. I wanted to ask, but I was afraid of the answer. In the car, he said, "You seem a little tired today." "Yeah. Work was busy." He nodded and didn't press. At that moment, his respect only made me more confused. I didn't know if I should feel relieved or distant. At the hospital, my mother was asleep. He and I sat in the hallway. The silence stretched on. Finally, I spoke. Jessica came to see me today. He turned to look at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. What did she say? About you. About the past. He was silent for a few seconds, then sighed. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have discussed us with anyone else. Then why did you? He looked at me with complete honesty, she asked, and I didn't want to hide it, but I never thought she would go to you. I bit my lip. She said you wouldn't change, that in the end, you'd always choose work. He didn't respond immediately. He looked down the hall, where the light cast a white glow on the wall. Chloe, I won't deny it. Work is still a huge part of my life, but I'm learning how to keep it from swallowing everything else. He turned back to me. I can't promise I'll become a completely different person, but I can promise that when you feel left behind, I won't be silent like before. I will listen, and I will adjust. I looked at him, my mind in turmoil. His words were sincere, but the fear inside me couldn't be erased by promises alone. I need time to believe that. He nodded. I know. We fell into silence again, but this time there was a palpable distance between us. I realized that getting back together wasn't just about facing the present, it was about confronting the ghosts of the past. That night, I went home late. I sat on the sofa, and Cloud curled up beside me. I stroked her fur, my heart heavy. I asked myself if I was being too hard on him. But then I remembered the lonely nights from before, and I knew I couldn't just ignore that fear. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable today. If you need space, I'll back off. I stared at the message for a long time. He wasn't arguing, making excuses, or pressuring me. That was something the old him would never have done. I need some time, I texted back, but don't disappear. I won't, came the swift reply. I'll be here. I put down my phone and closed my eyes. I knew this was a turning point. I could either bravely face my fear, or I could let it dictate all my decisions. The road ahead was far from easy, but at least this time, I no longer had to walk in the dark. After that conversation, Ethan and I truly did slow down. It wasn't a cold, awkward distance, but a conscious step back. He no longer texted every day or constantly asked how I was. He would just send a short message now and then to let me know he was still there. I did the same. I needed time to sort out my own feelings, to distinguish what was a fear from the past and what was a genuine emotion in the present. My mother started her physical therapy. Every day, I would take her to the rehab room. It pained me to watch her struggle with each step. Sometimes she would cry from the exhaustion, and all I could do was hold her hand tightly. Chloe, your old mother is causing you so much trouble. Don't say that, Mom. As long as you get better, I'm happy. In those moments, I realized that no one can be strong all the time. Sometimes, admitting your weakness and leaning on others isn't failure. It's honestly acknowledging your own limits. One afternoon, after taking my mother back to her room, I sat alone in the hospital hallway. It was drizzling outside, the raindrops tapping lightly against the glass. I opened my phone and scrolled through old photos. A picture of Ethan and me from our newlywed days. We were both so young, our eyes full of hope. Photos from short trips, from hurried dinners filled with laughter. I asked myself, where did we go wrong? It wasn't that we didn't love each other. We did. We just didn't know how to protect that love. My phone rang. It was my friend Mia. How are you doing these days? A little better than before. Mia was quiet for a moment. I heard you and Ethan are seeing each other again. Yeah. Have you really thought this through? I sighed. No. But I'm thinking, Mia chuckled softly. Chloe, I'm not taking sides, but you need to be clear about something. Are you afraid of the Ethan of today, or are you afraid of your memory of the Ethan of the past? Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I sat there, stunned. I was scared of getting back with my ex too, she continued. But I finally realized that the thing that scared me most wasn't him. It was the feeling that I had once lost myself. I hung up the phone and sat there for a long time, Mia's words replaying in my head. What am I afraid of? That he won't change? Or that I'll put my trust in him again and get hurt by my own hand? That night, I went home earlier than usual. I cleaned my small apartment, wiping down every corner of the cupboards, every shelf of the bookcase, as if tidying the space would clarify my mind. I opened the bottom drawer of the dresser, the one where I had buried the bank card for 2 years. It was empty now. I remembered how I had thrown it in there, vowing never to touch it. That vow was broken. Not out of weakness, but for my mother's life. And because of that, I had seen another truth about Ethan. He wasn't trying to buy me off with money. He was using it to maintain a faint connection, just in case I ever needed it. I sat on my bed, closed my eyes, and asked myself with complete honesty, if Ethan had never been my husband, if he were a new person who appeared in my life at this moment, would I give him a chance? The answer came faster than I expected. Yes. I wouldn't love him with the same blind sacrifice as before, but there was affection, a cautious trust, and a tiny hope that we could try again in a different way. The problem wasn't with him. It was with whether I had enough courage to stop the past from dominating the present. The next day, I was the one who texted Ethan first. "Are you free tonight? I need to talk." He replied a few minutes later. "I'm free. Where should we meet?" "That old cafe near my office." "Okay, I'll be there." That cafe was where I used to sit and wait for him to get off work. As I walked in, the familiar smell of coffee calmed my nerves. Ethan was already there, sitting at a window table. He stood up when he saw me. "I ordered you a coffee." "No, thanks." I sat down across from him. For a long while, I said nothing. He didn't rush me, just waited patiently. "I've been thinking for the past few days," I finally said. He nodded. "I'm scared. I'm scared of a lot of things. But I realize I can't let fear stop me from moving forward." He watched me intently, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not promising to be your wife again. I'm not promising to love you like I used to. But I'm willing to give you a chance. Not out of pity, not out of debt. Just because I want to see if we can do better." He was silent for a few seconds, then smiled. It was a faint smile, but I could clearly see the relief in it. "I don't need any other promises. This chance is more than enough. But I have one condition," I said. "Name it. If, during this process, I feel like I'm starting to lose myself, I will stop. And you have to respect that." He nodded, his voice firm. "I promise." We sat there, finished our coffees, and made some small talk. There were no confessions, no vows. Just two adults who, after a lot of pain, had decided to open a new path for each other without knowing how far it would go. On the way out, Ethan stopped at the cafe door. "Chloe, thank you." "For what?" "Not for giving me a chance, but for having the courage to be honest with yourself." I looked at him and smiled faintly. "Thank you for waiting." We parted ways there. On my way home, I felt much lighter. No more feeling of being forced, no more vague fears. Just a decision made with a clear head. I knew there would still be many challenges ahead, but at least I would no longer let the past hold me captive. After I said I would give him a chance, things didn't magically change like in a romance novel. There was no grand courtship, no roses filling the trunk of a car, no heart-stopping vows. Ethan began to pursue me again in a very different way. Slowly, carefully, and sometimes with an almost comical clumsiness. He started with the smallest things. A single text in the morning, around the time I usually woke up. "It's going to rain today. Don't forget an umbrella." Nothing more. I'd reply, "Okay," and put my phone down, a small warmth spreading in my chest. He had cared before, but it had been a kind of instruction. Now, it was a reminder, leaving the choice up to me. Our meetings were simple. Sometimes it was a noodle soup place in a back alley, other times a street-side cafe. Once, he suggested taking me to a fancy restaurant, but I turned it down. "I don't really like those places." He immediately nodded. "Okay, let's get pizza next time then." I laughed. I realized he was no longer trying to prove he could provide for me, but was learning to listen to what I actually wanted. My mother was getting better and better. Physical therapy was tough, but her spirits were much higher. Ethan would visit sometimes, but not too often, and he always asked first. Each time he came, he would chat with my mom for a bit and then leave, never staying so long that she would get tired from having company. One day, my mother smiled gently at him. "You're so busy, yet you still make time to visit. Thank you." He replied very politely, "Not at all. If you're ever feeling tired, please tell me not to come." My mother looked at me. her eyes seeming to understand everything. "Chloe, choose carefully, and then decide." I nodded. I was choosing with a clear head, not with blindness. At work, I started focusing more on my career. I took on a new project, and the pressure was immense. There were days I worked late, feeling ready to collapse. Ethan never complained that I was busy or blamed me for not having time. He would just send a single text, "I'm downstairs. Let me know if you want to eat something." If I said no, he would leave immediately. If I agreed, he would wait in the lobby, never coming up to the office or interrupting. Once, I asked him, "Doesn't it hurt your pride to always be waiting outside like that when you're seeing someone?" He smiled. "I'm seeing a grown woman, not an 18-year-old girl who needs to be coddled." His words made me pause. I suddenly realized he was seeing me for exactly who I was now. Not an ex-wife, not someone who needed to be taken care of, but an independent woman with her own world. But not everything was smooth sailing. Sometimes, old memories would surface without warning. One evening, we were having dinner when his phone rang. He looked at the screen, hesitated slightly, then got up and went outside to take the call. Watching his back, my heart sank. A familiar feeling washed over me, the feeling from years ago, when I would wait alone while he was busy somewhere out of reach. When he came back and saw how quiet I was, he sat down. "A client," he explained, before I even had to ask. "An urgent call. We're going to talk again tomorrow." I nodded, but the unease lingered. He watched me closely. "What are you thinking?" I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I'm scared. I'm scared of that feeling of being left behind." He was silent for a few seconds. "Thank you for telling me. I'll be more mindful. If something urgent comes up, I'll tell you beforehand instead of leaving you to guess." An adjustment, not an apology. I realized this was the biggest difference between the man he was now and the man he used to be. Another time, I was the one who told him I needed a weekend to myself, that I didn't want to see anyone. He simply replied, "Okay, rest well. Let me know when you feel like meeting up." No blame, no assumptions, no sulking. I was starting to feel safe enough to voice my needs, something I had always swallowed in the past. As time went on, our relationship progressed, not quickly, but steadily. No one was rushing, and no one was hiding. I still lived in my small apartment, worked, took care of my mother, and had time for Cloud. Ethan was a part of that life, but he didn't consume all of it. One evening, he came over to my place. Cloud was more used to him now and even let him pet her a few times. He smiled like a little boy. "She's accepted me." I laughed along. "It took long enough." He looked at me. "I'm not afraid of waiting." We sat on the sofa and watched an old movie. We didn't lean on each other or hold hands. But when I got up to get some water, he naturally followed and got me a glass. They were small gestures, but they came with no pressure. "Chloe," he said my name. "Yeah? I don't know where we're headed in the future, but I want you to know that this time, I'm really serious." I looked at him calmly. "I know. And I'm serious about protecting myself." He nodded and smiled faintly. "I respect that." That night, when he was leaving, I stood at the door and watched him go. I no longer felt that vague sense of fear. I knew I was taking slow but steady steps, and no matter the final outcome, I wouldn't have any regrets, because I hadn't betrayed myself to save a relationship. I climbed into bed and held Cloud in my arms. Outside, the city lights were still bright. I thought about the road ahead. We might fall in love again, or we might not. But what mattered was that this time, I was no longer a woman who placed her entire life in someone else's hands. And if I did fall in love again, it would be a love born not of endurance, but of clarity. I thought that once we learned to talk, listen, and slow down, everything would be smooth sailing. But life doesn't move in a straight line. Just when you think you can take a deep breath, a wave comes along, as if to test whether the foundation you've built is strong enough. It happened on a morning at the beginning of the month. I had just walked into a conference room when my phone rang. It was Ethan. It was rare for him to call at this hour, so I was a little surprised. I excused myself and stepped out to take the call. "Chloe, I have to go on an emergency business trip," he said, his voice low. "So suddenly?" "Where to?" "Chicago. There's a serious problem with the project. I'll have to be there for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer." I was silent for a few seconds. 2 weeks. 2 years ago, that amount of time had been the beginning of countless misunderstandings. "I know what you're thinking," he said, before I could ask. "I'm not calling to ask for permission. I'm calling to inform you, to be clear. I'm going to be busy, very busy, but I won't disappear. I'll contact you once a day, no matter how late it is." I took a deep breath. "You should go. Work is important." He paused. "You're not mad?" "I'm worried, but I'm not mad," I said, with complete honesty. He let out a long sigh. "Thank you for being honest." I hung up and went back into the meeting, but for the rest of the morning, I couldn't focus. I asked myself if I was ready to face this challenge, or if the old fears would swallow me whole the moment he was gone. Ethan left that same day. That evening, he sent me a text from his hotel. "Arrived. Had an emergency meeting, so couldn't call. Have you had dinner?" I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen, before replying, "Yes. Get some rest." The first few days went by okay. He texted consistently, though sometimes it was very brief. Sometimes it was just a single, "Work is done." Other times, "Exhausted. Let's talk tomorrow." I didn't demand more, and I didn't overthink it. I tried to maintain my own rhythm. Work, visit mom, come home to Cloud. But by the first weekend, I started to feel a strain. Not because he wasn't paying attention, but because an old voice in my head started whispering, "It's going to be the same as before. You'll be the one waiting again." That evening, I called him. He picked up after a few rings. "Chloe? Are you okay?" he asked immediately. "I'm fine, but I need to talk." He was silent for a moment. "I'm in a meeting with a client right now. Can I call you back in an hour?" The words were ordinary, but my heart sank. In the past, an hour often meant the whole night. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll call you, I promise." I hung up and put my phone on the desk. I got up and paced around the room. Cloud watched me, confused. The hour passed with excruciating slowness. I kept checking the clock. 15 minutes, 30, 45. My chest started to feel tight. "Calm down, Chloe. Don't let the past drag you down," I told myself, but my mind was in turmoil. Exactly 1 hour later, my phone rang. It was Ethan. "I'm sorry, the meeting ran a little over. Have you been waiting long?" I closed my eyes. "Yes." He was quiet, then said, "I'm listening." His words surprised me. No explanations, no excuses, just, "I'm listening." "I'm scared," I said in a low voice. "I'm scared of this feeling, of waiting, of having to calm myself down all alone. I'm scared of it." He didn't interrupt. "I'm not going to deny that I'm busy right now, but I don't want you to have to handle those feelings alone. This time, I'm here to listen." I took a shaky breath. The tightness in my throat eased a little. "I don't want to fight. I just want you to know that when you say wait, it brings up a lot of bad memories for me. I understand, and thank you for telling me now, instead of holding it in." He paused. "If I can't call back in an hour, I'll text you beforehand so you're not left guessing. And if you feel anxious, you have the right to tell me to end the call. I won't be angry." I sat down in my chair. The tension in my shoulders suddenly released. "Okay." We exchanged a few more short words and hung up. That night, I slept better than I expected. Not because he was close, but because I knew that this time I didn't have to guess anymore. The second week passed slowly but steadily. Sometimes he was so busy he could only send a single text in the middle of the night. Other times, he had more time, and we'd talk for 10 minutes. I stopped counting the hours or checking the clock. Instead of letting my fear lead me, I started to trust my feelings. On the day he was due back, I didn't go to the airport to meet him. Not because I was angry, but because I was at the hospital with my mother. He texted me, "I've landed. You stay with your mom. I'll come by tonight." That evening, he came to my apartment. Cloud ran out, but she was no longer as wary as before. He sat down on the sofa and let out a long sigh. "Tired?" I asked. "Tired, but okay." He looked at me. "Thank you for the past 2 weeks." "For what?" "For not running away. For talking." I looked at him, my heart softening. "Thank you for not making me guess." We sat there, not saying much. But in that silence, I felt one thing very clearly. We had just passed a major test. Not with promises, but with how we both reacted when fear showed up. Ethan stood up to leave. Before he went, he turned back. "Chloe, I don't know how many more waves will come in the future, but I know one thing. This time, when the wave hits, I won't let go of your hand and I won't let you drown with me." I nodded. "And if I feel like I'm drowning, I won't endure it in silence, I'll tell you." He smiled. "That's all I need." That night, lying in bed, I looked at the ceiling. I realized that mature love isn't the absence of fear. It's that when fear appears, both people choose to face it instead of running away. And maybe, just maybe, after all our wandering, he and I were getting very close to a place called peace. The long summer passed slowly. My mother recovered bit by bit from sitting up on her own, to holding a spoon to eat porridge, to taking her first trembling steps in the rehabilitation room. Every time she winced in pain but then looked at me and forced a smile, I understood more deeply that life has no straight paths, only people who are persistent enough not to give up halfway. Ethan continued to be a regular but non-intrusive presence in my life. He would come with me to the hospital on quiet afternoons. Sometimes he would chat with my mother for a bit and leave. Other times, he would stay longer, helping my father with the wheelchair or listening to my mother's old stories. Watching these scenes, my heart no longer ached as it used to. Instead, I felt a strange sense of familiarity mixed with newness. One afternoon, when my mother was well enough to sit outside in the hallway for some fresh air, she took my hand and said slowly, "Chloe, I can see that you two are not like you used to be." I smiled faintly. "Yes, we're learning again." My mother nodded. "Learning again is a good thing, but remember one thing. Don't hold on because you're afraid to lose, and don't run away because you're afraid to get hurt. What's important is to live honestly with your own heart." I squeezed her hand. Her words were simple, but they felt like the final punctuation mark on all the anxieties I had felt over the past months. That evening, Ethan drove me home. On the way, the city lights came on, reflecting off the car windows in long, shimmering streaks. He didn't turn on any music, just drove slowly, creating a quiet space for us. "Chloe," he said my name. "Yeah? I want to ask you something. I'm not trying to force you or jump to conclusions." I turned to look at him. "Go on." He took a deep breath. "Do you think we're heading in the right direction?" I was silent for a few seconds, then answered with absolute honesty. "Yes. Not because I'm certain about the future, but because in the present, I don't feel like I'm forcing myself to endure anything." He smiled, his eyes softening. "Me too." The car stopped in front of my apartment building. I opened the door and got out, but I didn't rush off. He got out of the car too and stood in front of me. There was no hurried physical contact, just two people standing close enough to feel each other's warmth. "Ethan," I said his name. "Yeah? I'm not promising to be your wife again, but I am willing to move forward with you as a partner, starting from the beginning. If one day I feel this isn't right, I will tell you. And if you feel it's not right, you have to tell me too." He looked at me for a long time, then nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I agree. And I promise that this time I won't leave you alone in silence." We didn't hug or kiss. We just looked at each other, like two people who had finally seen the shore after a long storm. In the months that followed, my life gradually returned to a normal rhythm. My mother was discharged and rested at home. I returned to work with a more grounded heart. Ethan was still busy, but he had learned to manage his time. Sometimes he would stop by in the evening for a quick dinner with me before going back to work. Other times, on the weekend, we would take my mother for a walk in the park, watching people exercise and listening to the wind in the trees. One day, while tidying up my small apartment, I opened the old drawer where I had kept the bank card. The drawer was empty, but my feelings were no longer empty. I smiled to myself. What was once a symbol of humiliation, then a means of salvation, had ultimately become the greatest lesson of my life. That evening, I told Ethan the story. After listening, he said only one thing. "Thank you for not letting that misunderstanding turn into resentment." I looked at him. "Thank you for using your time to change, instead of using your money to hold on to me." We looked at each other in silence. In that moment, some things didn't need to be said. 1 year after my mother's collapse, on a sunny afternoon, Ethan stood on the balcony of my apartment, holding my hand and looking out at the city. Chloe, I don't know what the future holds, but if I can walk it with you, I'm willing to go as slowly as we need to. I squeezed his hand lightly. I won't ask you to go fast. Just ask you to go with me and not leave me behind. He nodded. I promise. In that moment, I realized that happiness isn't about going back to the past or erasing old scars. It's when two people are mature enough to look at the cracks, not hiding or denying them, and slowly but firmly rebuild together. I used to think that bowing my head for help was defeat, but in the end, I learned that true defeat is ignoring the truth, refusing to communicate, and refusing to give yourself another chance. The story of Chloe and Ethan isn't a perfect fairy tale ending, but it's a real one, true to its emotions, true to its mistakes, and true to its growth. If you've been listening this far, perhaps you too have been lost between pride and love, in silence and misunderstanding. I hope this story reminds you of one thing: love doesn't die because of distance, it dies because of silence. And sometimes, giving each other another chance isn't weakness, it's courage.